Barakata Yahweh, Barakata Yahushai, by Shem Baraka Kudash Barakathom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh by Shem Yahushai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who ruled and teach well, and peace and salutations to Ya'akim out there pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Raya with another video, and I'm going to start it off with Lamentations chapter 4, verse 21 to 22. Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, you so-called white people, you red Hebrew Edomites, that dwellest in the land of Uz. The cup also shall pass through unto thee, this cup of torments, as it says in Deuteronomy 30:7. All these curses shall fall upon thine enemies. And we're starting to see the curses of Deuteronomy 28 start to fall upon you Edomites, because you're about to be taken out of rulership. And that cup that's also going to be passed unto you is that cup of slavery, because once you Edomites are taken out of power, you're going to be put under subjection of the Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, for 1,000 years of hardcore bondage and slavery. Thou shalt be drunken, and shalt make thyself naked. The punishment of thine iniquity is accomplished, O daughter of Zion. He will no more carry thee away into captivity, which is the times we're quickly coming into, when Yahushai HaMashiach, whom the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, is going to return to save the elect of his people and set up the kingdom. You Israelites are going to live in peace and rule for eternity. He will visit thine iniquity, O daughter of Edom. He will discover thy sins. And we can clearly see that Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is beginning to visit you Edomites for your iniquity. Your birth rates are declining globally. Your economies are on the verge of collapse. And everything you try to do is not working in your favor like it used to. And especially in the United States of America, which is biblically known as Babylon the Great, you American Edomites are having a very bad time right now. You've got the opioid epidemic and a massive number of Edomites committing suicide. And this is what I'll be dealing with in this article on the economiccollapseblog.com titled Deaths of Despair in the U.S. Hit Record High. That cup is being passed unto you Edomites. So how bad will things get when society starts to completely collapse? According to a shocking new report from the Commonwealth Fund, the suicide rate in the United States is the highest that it has ever been before. Sadly, the same thing can be said about the death rates from drug overdoses and alcohol. All three death rates are at an all-time record high, and yet our society is still fairly stable at the moment. So if we are seeing this many deaths of despair right now, what in the world are things going to look like when our society really begins to start crumbling? Today, Americans have literally thousands of different ways to entertain themselves, and yet we have never been unhappier. That's because the wicked are bearing rule. The wicked being you Edomites. The border of wickedness in Malachi 1 and 4. This is Proverbs 29 verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the true children of Israel, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the people rejoice, because once we're back in rulership, we're going to rule this planet under the laws, statutes, and commandments of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, the rivers of living water, the doctrine of life. But when the wicked beareth rule, you Edomites, the people mourn, because you Edomites do everything contrary to the scriptures. That's why this world's languishing under your rulership. You have GMO foods, you have chemtrails, you have 5G radiation, just complete madness. But again, when the Israelites are back in power, there's going to be clean air, clean water, clean food. The woman's going to be back in order, and the house is going to be back in order with the man at the head. People are going to live in tandem with nature as they were originally meant to. One out of every 6 Americans is taking psychiatric drugs. We are currently dealing with the worst drug crisis in American history, and people are killing themselves in record numbers, and this is all mainly applying to you Edomites. Nobody likes to be told that they are a failure, which you Edomites are. You've always been failures. The only reason you got to where you're at right now is because Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai was using you to fulfill prophecy, and you just about reached the bounds which you cannot pass. So that's why Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is dismantling your rulership. but it certainly appears that our nation has been on an extremely self-destructive path for a very long time. Even though deaths of despair have reached record levels, the researchers at the Commonwealth Fund found that there are major regional differences. The following comes from NBC News. Rates of death from suicides, drug overdoses, and alcohol have reached an all-time high in the United States, but some states have been hit far harder than others, according to a report released Wednesday by the Commonwealth Fund. As far as drug overdose deaths are concerned, researchers discovered that the states with the highest death rates were all in northern Appalachia. And when we go to Appalachian people in Google Images, what do we see? Edomites. Very rarely do you hear of a black mountain man or a black axe man. When we look at what's going on in mid-Atlantic states, West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, where Edomites mainly dwell, those are the states that have the highest rates of drug overdose deaths in the country. David Radley, a senior scientist for the Commonwealth Fund, said rates in those states are at least double the national average of fatal drug overdose rates. West Virginia had the highest drug overdose rates, fueled mostly by the opioid epidemic, which we know is mainly affecting you Edomites. What's more, those rates rose by 450% from 2005 to 2017, according to the report. In addition, the New England states also have extremely high drug overdose death rates. Nationally, the number of Americans that die from an opioid overdose each year now exceeds the number that die in car accidents. Talk about a depressing fact. And it's not a depressing fact if you're an Israelite in this truth, because as it says in Ecclesiasticus or Sirach chapter 25, one of the greatest things to see is the downfall of your enemy, and our main enemy is you Edomites. Meanwhile, for suicide and alcohol deaths, it is a completely different story. In both cases, researchers found that the highest rates are out west. Death rates from suicide and alcohol also showed regional disparities. People died at higher rates by suicide or from alcohol than from other drugs in Montana, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Oregon, and Wyoming, other states where Edomites mainly dwell. In particular, the suicide rate is disturbingly high in rural western areas, and this agrees with a previously published CDC study which discovered that the suicide rate in rural areas is actually 45% higher than in large urban areas where you so-called Negroes and Latinos mainly dwell. The suicide rate in rural America is 45% greater than in large urban areas, according to a study released last fall by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And more recent CDC reports said Montana's suicide rate leads the nation, coming in at nearly twice the national average. A third, long-touted CDC study currently under review listed farming in the occupational group along with fishing and forestry with the highest rate of suicide deaths, and these are occupations that Edomites are mainly in. And if you've been keeping your eyes in the news, you can see that these U.S. farmers aren't doing good at all. You've had record numbers of U.S. farmers filing for bankruptcy as well as committing suicide. And with these storms and historic flooding in the Midwest ruining these farmers' lands, causing them not to be able to plant a sufficient amount of crops, they're losing money, which is going to lead to them having to file for bankruptcy and then eventually committing suicide because they see no way out. It's a vicious circle. The occupational study was based on 2012 data when farming was strong and approaching its peak in 2013, says Jennifer Fahey, communications director for the nonprofit Farm Aid. Farmers' net income has fallen 50% since 2013 and is expected to drop to a 12-year low this year, the U.S. Department of Agriculture reports. Sadly, U.S. farmers are currently having their worst year in a generation, and they desperately need our support right now. As it says in 2 Esdras 15, They that till the ground in Egypt shall mourn. And we know that the United States of America, besides being known as Babylon the Great, is also known as spiritual Egypt and Sodom, as pursuant to Revelation 11 verse 8. Overall, the new report from the Commonwealth Fund found that since 2005, drug overdose deaths in the United States are up 115%, alcohol deaths are up 37%, and suicides are up 28%. Thanks in large part to those numbers, life expectancy in the United States has now fallen for 3 years in a row. And remember, this is mainly affecting Edomites. That's why you've got a lot of states starting to pass laws to restrict abortion, because they're trying to avert this demographics decline, but it's already too late. Despite all of our advanced technology, and despite our massively bloated, debt-fueled standard of living, many Americans are desperately unhappy. In an attempt to cure our unhappiness, many of us have turned to the medical system for answers, and as a result, more Americans are on antidepressants than ever before. In fact, NBC News has reported that 1 out of every 6 Americans is currently on at least one psychiatric drug. 1 in 6 Americans take some kind of psychiatric drugs, mostly antidepressants, researchers reported Monday. They also found that twice as many so-called white people, you Edomites, take those drugs as do so-called African Americans or other minorities, and fewer than 5% of Asian Americans do. And most people who take them are taking them long-term, Thomas Moore of the Institute for Safe Medication Practices in Alexandria, Virginia, and colleagues found. Slovakia. That's pretty much it with this article. But as you can see, things aren't going too good in the good old US of A, especially for you Edomites or so-called white people. And don't expect it to get any better. There's going to be no Make America Great Again. We're in the last seconds of the last days, and things are just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse until you're taken out of rulership and put into that 1,000 years of hardcore bondage and slavery, after which you're going to be eradicated from the face of the earth. This is Isaiah chapter 24. I'm going to start at verse 7. The new wine mourneth, the vine languisheth, all the merry-hearted do sigh.